Hello, everyone. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're excited to have you here. And I'm joined today by Sinclair. Hi, Sinclair.
Hi, Hugo.
How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
That's great. That's great. So quick introduction about myself. My name is Hugo. I'm the co-founder and CEO at a company called the RTG Solutions. So we are essentially a company that helps manufacturing organizations to cut and reduce waste in their supply chains. And the way how we do it is that we engage with data, and data tells story around how can we optimize and make those supply chains more efficient. So how about you, Sinclair? Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, thank you, Hugo. Well, my name is St. Clair Gerald, and I am a CSCP, a Certified Supply Chain Professional. I have been in supply chain for over 20 years, and it's my career that I thoroughly enjoy. Started out in finance and had an opportunity to get into supply chain, and found out that I really loved the fact that supply chain pretty much touches everything.
Yes.
So,
yes,
great career for me to be in, and for anyone who is looking to have a great start in a great career.
And I really like how you position that, Sinclair, in terms of how important supply chains are, right? So it touches literally everything, and
yes,
many times we don't even realize it, but it's essentially like how you say it. So everything that we see, pretty much everywhere in every single industry, it has some supply chain implications, right, and relationships.
Yes, sir.
So today we're going to talk about a couple of topics that I know, Sinclair, for yourself and also for myself, are very close to our hearts, which is inventory management and how to drive more sustainable supply chain outcomes by utilizing and working towards more optimized inventory management practices, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your history working in supply chain. I know you already presented some of your background, but tell us more. Tell us a little bit more about the companies that you work for and the experiences that you had working in the field.
Okay, thanks, Hugo. Well, since I've been in supply chain for over 20 years, nowadays you have a lot of supply chain management programs, Penn State, Michigan State, et cetera, where you can come in, get an undergraduate, graduate degree in supply chain management. Back when I started out, supply chain management was still evolving. It was called more, logistics. And for me, I actually started out my career in finance. And I was an accounts payable manager working at Brooks Brothers, the men's and women's clothier. And, we had finance and logistics reporting up to our CFO. And one day my CFO came to me and said, hey, I'm now, the accounts payable, accounts receivable manager. And the CFO comes to me one day and said, hey, I just fired the logistics manager and I want you to be the new one. So once I, climbed down off the ceiling, I told my boss that, sure, I'd love to be the new supply chain logistics manager. And, for me, I was in finance, so I knew all of the carriers, the, steamship lines, the vendors, but from a finance side, as far as, paying and, receiving, really didn't know anything about logistics or, kilos or 20-foot, 40-foot containers, all the operational stuff. But I jumped in with both feet, joined CLM, which was a Council of Logistics Management back then, which is now CSCMP, Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, and started attending conferences, going out, meeting with providers, with carriers, et cetera, and just jumped in with both feet and found out that, it was something that I really enjoyed, being customer facing and going out and, engaging, with people, building relationships, et cetera. So, from there.
Let me comment on a couple of things there, Sinclair,
sure.
Because I think you mentioned a couple of points that are really, really important for anyone starting in supply chain, which is one, know your numbers. So you came from a finance background. So therefore, you were familiar with numbers, you like numbers. And therefore you got into supply chain, and then you also understood that supply chain is a lot about numbers too. So that's one thing. And second thing, you mentioned continuous learning, right? You had the experience to, if there's some things that you didn't know, you always had the excitement and the drive to go and learn those things, right? So you got certified, you went into, learning, more supply chain specific content. So that's another thing that is quite relevant for anyone working in the field, right?
Yes. I mean, supply chain management, like I said, it used to be logistics and transportation. Then it evolved into supply chain management. But as you know, Hugo, our industry is constantly evolving. If you're standing still, what happened? What worked 30 years ago would still work today if it was 30 years ago, but it's not. So we have to stay on top of our industry. And even my certification, I'm a CSCP certified supply chain professional through ASCM, which is the Association for Supply Chain Management. And in order for me to maintain my certification, it's almost like being a CPA certified, public accountant, right, but in supply chain. So I have to stay on top of what's happening in my field. And I have to show that I am, as you said, engaged, continuous learning, staying on top of what's happening, within the industry.
Very good. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to stress those 2 points that I think were super important for anyone listening to.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I grew up in retail and, worked for, as I said, Brooks Brothers. I worked for Foot Locker, starting out as a corporate vendor relations manager, eventually being promoted to director of supply chain management. And in that role, it was my job to basically make sure that, Foot Locker had 5 operating divisions, Foot Locker, Lady Foot Locker, Kids Foot Locker, Champs, Foot Action. And we had centralized supply chain logistics so that we supply services to all of those multiple divisions. So as director of supply chain, my job was basically to help make sure that everyone played well in the sandbox. Because as you know, Hugo, in supply chain management, it's all about trade-offs and making adjustments. So
all the time,
it's all about optimizing the whole to benefit the company.
100%. It's a system thinking approach, right? It's not.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not a linear. Absolutely. It's not a linear system. It's a very complex, actually, system, right?
And one other thing I wanted to mention is that with large corporations, you've got a lot of different moving parts, and as I said, it's about optimizing the whole as opposed to individual pieces. So that was my role at Foot Locker as director of supply chain management. From there, I've also moved on to individual consulting, worked on projects for the United States Air Force, doing an enterprise supply chain risk management study for them on different aspects of their supply chain. And I've also worked in, fast moving consumer goods, cold chain, supply chain, logistics, et cetera. So I've got a pretty good range of experience.
I mean, super interesting experience. And I think I love the fact that you have been able to deploy your skills in different industries. I have one question for you. And again, this is basically a perspective that, and I have my own position on this, but I wanna get yours. So do you think being a person, a professional that has worked in different industries, do you think that supply chains are radically different industry to industry, or there's commonalities across industries that are, relevant to each individual company or individual, industry as a whole?
Yeah, a great question, Hugo. And I would have to say that when you break down, supply chain and supply chain management to its basic form, it's about getting, the right product to the right place at the right time, and if you want to add in, with the right documentation. So it's all about meeting those requirements. So whether it's retail, whether it's manufacturing, et cetera, you still have to, if you're dealing with finished goods, making sure your customers are getting the proper finished goods. If you're in a manufacturer or a supplier to a manufacturer or an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, making sure that those raw materials getting to the right place so that you don't have, shutdowns, et cetera,
Yeah.
in your manufacturing capability.
And I agree 100% with you, because and the reason why I ask is because I always continue to listen people, and again, it's not a surprise, it's what I think we as humans believe, but essentially people believes that their industry is so special, right? And their industry is so different from other industries. And one of my comments to whenever I hear that perspective is, definitely industries have some level of specificity, right? And things that are really, really special for specific industries. But when you think about supply chain management practices, and when you think about, the main plan, source, make, deliver, return flows in any supply chain, no matter the industry where you are, if you think about it, you're going to be able to actually allocate your processes according to that methodology anyway. So perhaps 80%, from my perspective, and this is my take, in my experience, I would say that 80% of those processes repeat industry to industry somehow, right? So those foundational elements. Now, there's of course that 10%, I don't know, variability industry to industry that make that supply chain in that specific industry special. But essentially, I'd say, from my perspective, I believe that there's a lot of commonalities right out there when you think about that plan, source, make, deliver, return flow of information and goods.
Yeah, I totally agree, Hugo. And as you said, it's all about the processes. Logistics, supply chain management. It's about a number of different interrelated processes, and they all have to fit together, correctly in order to have a good, outcome.
Excellent. Yeah. So let's get into inventory management and sustainability, which is, by the way, the topic of today's discussion. But so from your perspective, so what challenges are companies facing with inventory management today? And there's people talking about inventory excess all the time, inventory shortages in other cases. We have gone through a couple of very, very challenging years from a demand predictability standpoint, also from an inventory management standpoint. So what do you see as challenges in the industry today?
Well, one of the biggest challenges that I see, Hugo, is that everyone has inventory. And, depending on, you talked about different, industries, et cetera, whether it's pharma, whether it's, high tech, whether it's retail, everyone has inventory. And, as we know, or most of us know, inventory is an asset on the balance sheet. So a little aside to my growing up in finance for a little bit there. So inventory is an asset on the balance sheet. However, inventory also ties up your working capital, which is your cash. And cash tied up in inventory can't be used in other areas of the business until that inventory is either used or it's sold. And what happened with the pandemic, which was, a black swan event, that kind of threw, as you mentioned, demand planning and forecasting into disarray. So demand planning forecasting is based a lot on historical, data and analysis. But with the pandemic, with COVID, as consumers started working from home, their consumption moved from services such as going to the movies, plays, concerts, cruises, etc., because everyone's now stuck at home. And while folks were at home, started working from home, they still had income and they still had disposable income. So what happened, there was a shift in demand from services to more durable goods because, Hugo's sitting at home now, he's working from his home office and he says, you know what? I could use a new 80-inch TV. My 65-inch just isn't big enough anymore.
I need many monitors.
Yes, consumers still had disposable income. A lot of people working from home, and they started buying more durable goods, such as big screen TVs, laptops, refrigerators, washing machines. So from an inventory standpoint, companies were kind of caught flat-footed by the shift in demand, and they ended up with either not enough inventory or finished goods or too much inventory in the wrong places. So when you think about companies that make TVs, flat screen TVs, they were like, all right, you know what? Demand is down. People work from home. It's a pandemic. Everything's shut down. I'm going to start canceling my orders for, my big screen TVs. But Hugo is sitting at home and he's still ordering TVs and laptops or whatever else. So those companies were kind of caught flat-footed because the demand was still there and that demand increased, but they did not have the inventory to meet that demand. So as I said, it could be a situation where you had too much inventory or not enough inventory. Right. And talking about the point of inventory management and how that can lead to write-offs, et cetera, when you have inventory in the wrong places, you're not going to be able to meet that particular customer demand. And when you end up with that situation, then you end up with write-offs, which is where you have inventory. It wasn't, so now you have to get that inventory off your books, and then you have to write that inventory off, which most companies don't like to do because that's a hit to your balance sheet and to your bottom line, writing off inventory.
And that's a very, very good point, St. Clair, and I agree with you with the whole scenario that has happened over the last couple of years where, the conventional variables of planning were challenged, right? And actually all our historic data started to be very, very unpredictable. It's not really helpful to really, drive some things more forward. Now, I liked your comment around inventory being an asset. For many, many people not necessarily make the connection between inventory and the financials of a company and how carrying too much inventory could represent turning that asset into actually a liability, because it could easily become a liability in the future when you're going back to your comment around inventory write-offs. Now you have assets that are not sellable anymore for whatever reason, right? Because they got discontinued, because they got expired. When you think about food manufacturing companies, for instance, they purchase materials, ingredients to produce finished goods, or even the finished goods by themselves got expired or close to expiry, and now they're not accepted by large retailers because they already surpassed the 75% available shelf life, for instance. That these guys have some rules there. So, so easily an asset can be turned into a liability of a company if those inventory management practices are not well fine-tuned. And I mean, no one has a crystal ball, and it's hard to manage inventory, especially when you have thousands of different items in potentially, hundreds of different locations. So this is not easy, right? And that's where I think this correlation between healthy inventory management practices and, and being able to track and monitor behaviors much more frequently, right? Consumer behavior, demand, how inventory is shifting, in every location very, very, very frequently is super, super important today, right?
Yes, absolutely. Great point is, retail. If it's winter and a lot of big retailers, what they have to do, because they're buying in such huge quantities, they have what we call 6 month futures. So they have to predict and order what is going to sell 6 months in the future, 6 months prior to that. So things can change pretty quickly in the span of 6 months. So say, for instance, you're ordering, fleece, which based on your historical data, fleece jackets and tops were a big selling item the previous year or the previous couple of years. Folks are working from home now. Right. They're not really going out. So you know what? All those retailers are stocked up on fleece because people are going out and it's chilly. They're working from home. You know what? I can stay in my loungewear and pajamas all day. So for, the Gap and Old Navy and Foot Locker that bought all this fleece because people are going to buy in cold weather stuff. It's sitting there in inventory because folks are at home. They're not out and about, and they don't really need all those fleece jackets and tops. So, as you said, now that asset is now becoming a liability because now you have to write off markdown to get rid of, that prior season product so you can bring in fresh goods.
Exactly. We as a company that operate in the supply chain space and data space, we constantly do research studies, right? And we go into the market to run some benchmarks, etc. And one of the things that it was brought to our attention, of course, through the analysis that our team put together, is that sort of the average, let's say, food manufacturing company out there spends between, I would say, 0.5 up to 3% of their annual revenues in write-offs. Which, when you think about it, I mean, you're talking about let's pick the example of $100 million annual revenue company. So you're talking about, write-offs that may go from $500,000 up to $3 million of inventory that get expired every year because of different circumstances, right? It could be, again, discontinuation, product getting expired, returns, obsolete, change in certain line of product. You're launching a new product, and then what happens with the existing or the previous product that you were promoting in the market? So it's a big number, right? And so when you look at that number has two key consequences from our perspective. One is, of course, the financial consequence. We already discussed about that. And the second consequence, which leads me to the next question, is around sustainability. Because essentially, when you are writing off product, materials, or finished goods, labels, or whatever, high chance that those materials or products are going to end up somewhere, either in a landfill, sometimes incinerated, sometimes partially recycled, and therefore there's, of course, sustainability implications out of this, right? So the lower the write-offs for a company is not only good for financial statements, but it's also good for the environment. So
absolutely.
So if we think about how data, right, helps and has changed the role of the inventory professional now in this world we're living in. So how do you see that evolving? How do you see the role of data evolving in the work of the supply chain or the inventory management professional today?
Yeah, so another great question, Hugo. As you mentioned before, I'm comfortable with numbers. I, started out my career in finance, so comfortable crunching numbers and data. And if you're an inventory or supply chain manager, it's very important to be able to manage that data. Now, it's a double-edged sword because, nowadays, we have the capability to accumulate so much data. Sometimes it's like drinking from the fire hose. you get your head ripped off. So we need companies like yours who are able to distill that information down and provide it to individuals like myself and my companies who can now use that data, and it's in a manageable form. Right. So, data and analytics have become a driving force in inventory and supply chain for supply chain professionals. You
pointed out something, sorry to interrupt there, because I think you made a very good point. So you said companies, and let me rephrase it to put it this way. So it's hard to find a company today that has no data. Actually, the opposite is happening. So the average company is having access to perhaps too much data, right now.
Right.
And I think it's a trend that is going to continue. It's not going backwards. It's going forward. So more data is available. Now, the challenge is then how to turn that data effectively into insights, into operational insights that guide your decision-making process. And I think
Yes.
a lot of companies are still trying to make sense of that data available to turn it into operational insights. And essentially, that's a very good step forward, but it could be even also insufficient if you're not taking the third step forward, which is now I have operational insights. How can I turn those operational insights into actions? So improvement actions. So now I'm making a decision that I can measure, I can track, and I know that it's influencing my performance positively, right? So I think that sort of train of thought, like data into insights, insights into actions, is what actually drives performance improvement, right? What do you think about that?
No, absolutely. As you know, business management expert Peter Drucker said, you can't improve what you don't measure. And you need to have the right data. So it's not just about having data, you have to have the right data. When we had the pandemic and COVID changed our world, everyone is talking about the new normal. Well, the new normal is a VUCA environment, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it's hard to make decisions based off historical data in a VUCA environment.
Right.
So we have to come up with new ways as professionals to get the right data and get the right information, that we need. For me, as a supply chain professional, when I was a logistics manager, visibility was always a big deal, for me, because you want to find out where's my product, where's my stuff, where are my SKUs, where are my POs, are they on a container, are they sitting in a shipyard, are they on a boat, are they on a stack train coming across? So having the right data, having that visibility into where either your raw materials or your finished goods are, that is a big game changer. And you can't have good visibility without good data. So, they kind of go hand in hand. For me, I always wanted to have the right answers. When my boss came to me and said, okay, where are my, Air Force Ones? And I can say, oh, you know what? We've got 100,000 pair coming in, and it's currently, sitting in Kansas City, and the drayage agent is going to be taking it down to our big box distribution center tomorrow, and we can have it out in stores by next week. As opposed to, I don't know.
Let me run a report. Let me run a spreadsheet and see, where my things are, right?
Right. So, as you know, senior management is very impatient when it comes to getting answers.
Yes,
so
I agree with you 100%.
From a supply chain inventory perspective, you want to be able to grab that data, you didn't have to run a report or whatever, extract it, use some sort of, decision support system. You want to be able to get that information and, turn that around pretty quickly. So good data and good visibility are, very important.
I agree.
Especially in nowadays, fast moving consumer goods.
I completely agree.
The reason it's called fast moving consumer goods, because if you miss that trend or whatever, no one wants to buy yesterday's style. Everyone wants the new, fresh styles, etc. So you have to stay on top of it. You have to be able to get your goods in and out to the consumer to keep that consumer happy. One of the things that I used to have to do is figure out if something went wrong. You're buying goods from, say, Nike. Nike misses a sailing. So you don't have those goods at the predictable time.
Right.
So now it's a matter of, okay, what levers can I pull to expedite that shipment so that I can get that shipment into the hands of my distribution folks so that they can get that out to my stores so that we can meet consumer expectations. No one wants to hear an excuse that, oh, well, this happened or that happened. VPs of the divisions, they just want to know that, hey, I'm going to meet my sales target, and they don't want to hear that someone in supply chain logistics couldn't figure out how to get 100,000 pair of Air Force Ones into their stores to meet their sales target.
You're right, 100%. Now let's talk about sustainability, right? Sustainability is such an important topic, and I think, from my perspective at least, the way how we have operated supply chains. The conventional way of operating supply chains hasn't really considered historically the sustainability component evidently for decision making, right? So let's talk about how, from your perspective, can inventory managers positively influence ESG outcomes from a sustainability perspective, from a sustainability standpoint, environment? What do you think about that, Sinclair?
Yeah, I mean, I think no sustainability effort can be successful without including the supply chain, which includes, supply chain managers, inventory managers, et cetera. My experience was that in order to be more sustainable and be able to reduce your carbon footprint, you have to be more efficient. And part of being more efficient is also, building trust and building relationships. So a good example is when you're dealing with buyers. Buyers, they're buying, whether they're buying finished goods or they're buying, raw materials, et cetera, they always want to get their product or goods into the warehouse as soon as possible. And they're always going to try and hedge and order a little bit more than they need because they want to make sure that they're not caught not having enough goods or finished goods or raw materials, et cetera. From a supply chain inventory management perspective, if you can build trust with those buyers, with those procurement folks to let them know that, okay, this shipment is scheduled to be in DC on April 30th. You can build that trust so that they're going to order exactly what they need for that inbound shipment, as opposed to, well, I'm not sure if St. Clair is going to actually get my goods here on time. So you know what? I need 1,000 pieces, but let me order 1,500 just in case he doesn't get my stuff to me on time. So when you can have that relationship, when you can build those, power skills, those soft skills of, communication, interpersonal relationships, et cetera, and, work with your buyers, your procurement folks, with your carriers, that in itself is going to help to, one, reduce your inventory needs, free up your cash, and at the same time, it's going to be more sustainable and reduce your carbon footprint because now you have fewer goods moving. You're going to end up with, less overstocks, et cetera, and be able to, meet your demand with, the proper inventory levels.
Yeah, I like that angle, and I think it brings a fresh perspective into how inventory managers can influence positive ESG outcomes from a sustainability standpoint. And sort of going back to my earlier point regarding inventory write-offs. So I think from my perspective too, one of the biggest ways how inventory managers and professionals in the field can influence better outcomes when it comes to ESG and sustainability is to making sure that write-offs get reduced, right? So because that's a fantastic way to save, number one, on all the carbon emissions and waste and energy and labor and so transportation, everything that went into a finished good or a material that then get disposed, right? So the less we write off, the better for the environment. That's to me is one of the key things that make that connection evident to me as well between that. So the role of the inventory manager, the professional managing inventory, the supply planner, the supply chain professional, and sustainability outcomes. That's an area which is quite specific, but it's quite visible and quite actionable. That you can see, you can track, you can monitor, you can improve, you can have set your goals, your targets, and you can attain those targets if you put a plan behind it, right? So, and that's the important thing, right?
Yes.
Excellent.
I mean, one of the things that we talk about now, which is on the top of everyone's mind, is e-commerce, especially from a retail perspective. Everyone was home with COVID, so that gave us DoorDash, that gave us Uber Eats, So one of the things that we have faced, especially in commerce and fast-moving consumer goods and retail, is what I call destruction of density. So previously, pre-COVID, shippers, companies used to like to get these big shipments. You get a big shipment in, it's 500 cartons, et cetera, and you ship it to your store, and consumers come in and they pick up those items and they take them home. Now we have what we call this destruction of density. So instead of getting these big, dense shipments with a lot of goods, now Hugo is ordering 2 pairs of socks, a t-shirt, and 1 pair of shoes. So before, Hugo used to come in and go to his favorite store, whether it's Target, whether it's Bergdorf Goodman, get his socks, his t-shirts, et cetera, take them home. Now Hugo's sitting at home, and you still are working, you still have disposable income. You're not going to go to Bergdorf Goodman. You're going to sit at your computer and order that. And Bergdorf wants to keep you as a happy customer. So now they have to put that product into a box and ship it to you. And they're not going to say, well, Hugo, if you order a dozen more socks, then we can make it a nice big box and make it more cost effective for us. That's not going to work. You want what you want as a consumer when you want it. So there's been this destruction of density where things are now being shipped out to multiple customers, consumers, but much smaller quantities instead of, bigger shipments, et cetera. So that's something where we've had to deal with from an inventory, standpoint to try and make things, more sustainable and more efficient.
That is a very, very interesting point. And I think that perspective changes not only efficiencies, cost, but also timing, right? So getting to hundreds or thousands of consumers, very same day delivery or the next day delivery is a completely different challenge also than you shipping, 1 full or 10 full container trucks or trucks, scheduled, right, for delivery for the next week or whatever. So it configures a completely different scenario, what you had described around e-commerce and the challenge of, more granular distribution, I would say, not sort of really, really granular distribution, right? So that's a very interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
Last question for today. So there's a concept in the market that people is talking more and more nowadays, which is around the concept of triple bottom line. So the triple bottom line, so it's a concept that speaks about planet, people, and profits, right? And that's the concept of triple bottom line. And again, connecting with this ESG component, connecting with that organizations should care not only about profits, but of course, importantly, around their people and around the planet, the outcomes into the planet.
Right.
So give me if you could share with our audience, one example based on your experience of how you believe that companies can begin to incorporate this triple bottom line concept into their supply chain practices. That would be awesome.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, you summed up the triple bottom line, pretty well. Coming from a finance background, pretty much everything was based on the bottom line, which is profit. And, back in the 70s, Milton Friedman, he said the basic requirement of a corporation is to make money for their shareholders. So the bottom line was the big focus there. Now, as we fast forward to all the different things happening with sustainability, climate change, et cetera, consumers are really driving that effort and forcing companies to be more sustainable and to be more embracing of the triple bottom line, which is, people, planet, and profits. So we can't have companies that don't make profits. If they don't make a profit, they're not going to be around. At the same time, we want to be able to protect the planet, and we have to be able to have, good, proper working conditions, for, our workers and suppliers, et cetera. So there are companies out there who are actually making an effort to operate at that intersection of people, planet, and profits. So those companies that can operate at that intersection of that triple bottom line, those are the companies that going forward are going to be more successful, because now with the internet, social media, if 60 Minutes shows up outside your factory and they find out that you have child labor in your factory and the cameras are rolling, all of a sudden all that goodwill, all that brand equity that you built up is going to go out the window. So companies now have to make that effort to try and operate at the intersection of people, planet, and profits. And at the same time, there's an opportunity to actually increase your profits, because consumers are very aware now. And if they see that your company is not practicing sustainable goods, not trying to get to net zero emissions, not trying to reduce your carbon footprint, they're going to go shop with your competitor. So there's definitely a component there that's going to drive that, going forward. And, having worked with a wide range of industries and, different companies, it's definitely a process where you can operate at that intersection and still be a successful company. Just to mention, a company, Caterpillar, that you're, familiar with. Caterpillar, they make, big, heavy construction equipment, et cetera. But when you're buying a new front end loader, you want to get rid of your old one because it's kind of worn out. Caterpillar will take that old front end loader back. They will give you a discount on the new one, and they will reuse and refurbish those parts into new products that are coming out. So, you don't end up with a front end loader in a big landfill or a dumpster, et cetera. And that's more sustainable for the planet, being able to, recycle and reuse, products, et cetera. So that's one example there.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And I think I like the way how you frame it in regards to enabling organizations to operate at that magic triangle, or whatever you want to call it, right? So intersection between, people, planet, and profit, and it's possible, and it's the way to go. And companies that execute on this mandate, it's a consumer's mandate, by the way. It's our mandate, yes. And therefore that companies that can adapt fast to this new mandate, I think the companies are going to succeed moving forward, right? So that's a very, very strong and powerful message moving forward. So it's been great discussing with you, St. Clair. I think it's been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate, all your insights and your experience and your perspectives. So is there anything that you would like to add at the end of this conversation, so our audience can get your last piece of advice or insight in regards to inventory management, ESG, and sustainable supply chain practices?
Well, as you said, Hugo, it's a consumer mandate. And I think any companies going forward who don't pay attention to that consumer mandate to be more sustainable and to practice, ES and G, is going to eventually feel the effects of that. So, I'm a supply chain professional, but I'm also a consumer. And, for me, I am going to want to have, clean air and clean water available for, my kids and their kids, my grandkids, going forward. So I think there's a lot of power out there, and, the companies that, recognize that and, move towards, net zero, emissions or reducing their carbon footprint will ultimately, be the ones that, survive and be more competitive. And you can still make a profit doing it. It's all a matter of being more creative and more innovative, being aware of what is happening in our world and in our environment.
Excellent. So St. Clair, if people want to reach out to you, so where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a public profile. Just send me an invite and I'll be happy to connect with you. And also you can go to my company, RTG Solutions Group. We are a boutique training and professional management company, and you can also reach out to me through there.
Amazing. So, well, thank you very much, everyone in the audience, for spending some time with us. I think it's been, for me personally, it's been great discussing with you, St. Clair, and getting your insights and your perspectives. And I invite you to join us for future discussions around topics about supply chain topics, data topics, ESG. We're really passionate about those three things: supply chain, data, and ESG practices, the triple bottom line. That's what we do. And essentially, I also invite you, anyone in the audience, to learn a little bit more about our solutions and our applications to help organizations reduce waste and reduce the way how they operate in their supply chains and find ways to become more efficient, more respectful with the planet, adhere to sustainability practices, and all of this using data, which we believe from our perspective is the most untapped asset of any organization today. And so I invite you to log in, check for our updates, and learn about specifically our inventory management module that helps organizations to reduce waste and reduce impact in the environment. So thank you very much for staying with us today. And for latest news and leadership series, follow the OWL Solutions on LinkedIn or follow our YouTube channel at the OWL Solutions. So thank you very much for joining us. And it's been great to speak with you, St. Clair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hugo, for having me. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.